started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fasting Method Podcast. I am Coach Nadia, Dr. Nadia Pataguana, and today I am joined by a very special guest, one of our community members who I've grown to really admire, and I invited her to come in here today and talk to us. So please say hello, Steph. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Well, hello, everybody.
So I'll tell you guys right off the bat, and I was just having a quick chat here with Steph, why I really wanted to come in today. I don't have specific questions because I'm as curious as you all probably are in just hearing a bit more about her journey. But the reason why I was really motivated to invite Steph to speak is because she's quite a bit different. And I've done this before. You guys know not too long ago, I interviewed one of my very young clients who had a very severe case of PCOS. And Steph is one of these people that, even though she's not a coaching client of mine, so I don't know as much about her as I did some of the previous ones I've talked to, she's just a force. And I'm more and more curious to hear more about her journey. And she's also probably quite different than most of the people in our community. And so, like some of you out there that might be wondering, would this community be a good fit for you? I think that once you hear a little bit more about Steph's journey, she is a young woman, a young mom, and probably has a few of the things that some of you are wondering about, or some of you might have and might be wondering, well, would this community be a good fit for me? The reason why I think Steph has succeeded in this community is I think she really is very active in the community. She takes part in the group challenges. She takes part in a lot of the little things that are going on in the community, but she also provides a lot of support to people. And I think that's key. I think for accountability and for your own self-motivation, when you sort of become like the helper, right? Somebody who people go to ask for help. She's created a few subgroups within our community. And so watching that and seeing how gracious she is with her time, considering that she is a young mom, busy. And I know she's busy because it was hard to find a time for us to record. I've just been watching her from afar. And I'm very curious to listen to a bit more of Steph's story and to invite her to come and share it with you guys. And she graciously accepted. So hi again, Steph.
Hi, thanks for having me today, Nadia. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So how about we start with just you sharing a little bit about yourself, as much as you want to share, of course, and also when you found TFM and why you decided to join TFM.
Sure. So I live in the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska, and I work full time. I have one son, a 6-year-old. I'm married. And like you said, I'm a busy mom. We just have the one kiddo, so not as busy as some, but still it's, we have a lot going on. And so, after my son, we had, some ups and downs, of course, like anyone does when they have their first child. And I was, kind of not losing the baby weight very easily, and it would kind of come and go. And so it was about 2 years ago, I think, that a friend of mine had recommended Dr. Fung. It was when Life in the Fast Lane had first come out. And so I downloaded the audiobook and I listened to it, and I loved it so much that I started over again immediately as soon as I finished it, and I listened to it again. And that was the start of my fasting journey. I had never really done anything with fasting before. Before I was married and had kids, I was incredibly fit. I used to run half marathons. I've done a bodybuilding competition before. I lifted weights a lot. I was very strong and very healthy. And at that time, we lived in Europe. And then about 11 years ago, we moved back to the United States. And that was before I got pregnant. But now that I've had a lot of time to think about it, that's when some of my health problems, I think, really started. And for me, a big health problem that I've had is stomach issues and gut health and things like that. But with the fasting method, I think I came to this community not really knowing if it would be a good fit for me. I never have had a lot of weight to lose. I think a lot of people, rightly so, come to our community because they have some weight to lose and they're really not sure what they need to be doing or how they need to be doing it, but they know that what they're doing isn't working. And for me, I didn't have a lot of weight to lose, but I do feel like I knew that what I was doing still wasn't working for me, for my health and my well-being. And so I think my journey has been a little bit different than a lot of our community members, but I think that I have found a place in this community. And even though my journey looks different than most people's, I have found a wonderful group of people who could not be more supportive and loving and caring, and my cheerleaders. And I try to be that for other people too. And I think that regardless of how far your journey from the start to the beginning, when you find the community, how far your journey might be, I think that this is a place for anyone who wants to improve their health. And whether that means losing weight or whether that means improving your health in other ways, I think that there's a place for anybody who wants to improve their health in our community. And so, yeah, it was a couple of years ago that I started with the fasting kind of on my own after reading Life in the Fasting Lane. And then I kind of hit a plateau. I didn't really know what I was doing at that time. I thought I did, but I really didn't. So then I came into the community and I joined and I started doing meetings and I started a coaching package and started kind of working on learning more about it. And in that amount of time, the things that I have learned that I never knew before are just incredible, too many to list. And the people that I've seen either from afar or having interactions with and their journey and how they've changed their own lives too is just a really cool thing to participate in and to be a part of.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you, before we hear a little bit more about your journey, you triggered a few thoughts here. One, funny, because I'm a mom of two, I think moms of one are sometimes a lot busier than moms of two. It's sometimes a lot harder. My experience and what I've seen from people that I know, because when you have a second one, it's a built-in sort of live-in best friend and entertainment. And when you have just one, you got to fully. So I beg to differ. I think you're very busy, and having one kid probably means you're a little bit busier than those of us that have two or three. But aside from that, I actually didn't know that you coached. I would love to hear more about that. That's fun. I thought you were just one of those people very, very active in the community. So that's a fun surprise there for me. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in just a second. But you said another thing, Steph, there that really triggered a thought for me and a really interesting conversation. As a coach, right? As a health consultant, as a naturopathic doctor for 20 years now, and I've only ever worked with people in this particular field, right? I've only ever helped people lose weight, reverse diabetes. I've always stayed in the same sort of, my function really has been the same professionally. What I have found is that I have coached probably the same number of people that wanted to lose 10 pounds as wanted to lose 100 pounds. I've probably had the same number of clients, pretty much 50-50, of people that were having a hard time losing 10 pounds and just could not figure out. And I'm not saying that that's all you had to lose, but I'm just using sort of this extreme. And I'm one of those people. Like, my concern with weight has always been 10 pounds, one way or the other. There was a point where I was too thin, and I was always trying to gain those 10 pounds. And then there've been numerous points in my life because of insulin resistance where I've gained 10 pounds. And it was realizing that those 10 pounds for me, those extra 10 pounds, and even before I gained the weight, I was very insulin resistant, right? And for me, it's always been visceral fat. The extra weight's always been, up until very recently, it's always been visceral fat around the organs. But I have literally coached just as many people that wanted to lose 10 pounds and had just as much difficulty. And I wonder if maybe because you've gone through this yourself, you can shed a little bit of light of why you think that is for you.
Well, for me personally, like I said, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, but I think that there were some things I needed to address otherwise, or my body was physically ready to attack kind of a longer fast and get some more sort of therapeutic and healing and weight loss fasts. And as I had mentioned, my gut health, I think, was one of those, and working on kind of fixing that. And eating is certainly one of your 5 pillars, Nadia, of course, is the food that we eat. You know, it's great to fast, but we have to choose the right foods. And I think that I needed to clean up my diet a little bit, but there was some issues going on that needed some kind of deeper attention. I know now that I was definitely having a lot of trouble, both with anxiety as well as my physical feelings during fasting when my gut health was a mess. And then for me personally, I think the other thing that I really needed to address before I've gotten more comfortable into longer fasting is stress. That's another one of your pillars. And I've done some work in the last several months on managing my stress response, managing cortisol. You know, Coach Lisa talks about that a lot, managing our cortisol and our stress response. And in reflection, I've learned that I really used to have a lot of anxiety around fasting. And when I would get into a fast, I would go into it with the best of intentions, but I would kind of freak out and I would get in my head, but it wasn't just in my head, it was in my body too. And it was like this kind of negative feedback loop where it just wouldn't work for me. And I would try and I would feel like such a failure. But I think because I've been able to kind of work on some other stuff that through introspection, I realized was sort of limiting my ability to be consistent with my fasting, since I've been able to kind of work through those things. Now I can kind of face that challenge both leading up to it and during it with much more resolution and without sort of those physical feelings of, you know, pain or unmanageable hunger too, or that feeling of stress and anxiety that comes up in your body and also in your mind when you're doing that.
Okay. So just to finish off that thought about the 10 pounds versus 100 pounds, I think that there's a lot more people looking for help than I think people realize. And if you're somebody out there struggling, somebody listening to this and struggling with those 10 pounds or 20 pounds and thinking, I should just be able to do this on my own, I just want them to know that how many people there actually are within our community. So much so that Megan's current masterclass was on how to lose those 10 pounds and maintenance, right? So there's that much request and need, right, for that amount of help. And I think that a lot of people, probably more than we realize, even more than look for help, struggle on their own with this because they know that what they're doing is not working, but they kind of blame themselves like, something that I'm doing wrong, or my body this, or limiting beliefs, as you were saying, that we need to sort of overcome. And luckily, and you mentioned a couple of resources, luckily we have Coach Terry around, who is always doing podcast episodes, but she's got her own coaching clients and she's got her daily community groups. And just today I had a coaching client that is working with both me and Terry. And she was telling me about, because you mentioned anxiety and adrenal health and cortisol. And so my client today was telling me how in her last conversation with Terry, Terry recommended yet another amazing book that I myself went and looked into. And I know that you, Steph, have been involved in two, as I said earlier, two subgroups within our community. Again, it is one of my 5 pillars. So we have identified a long, long time ago that not just how you eat, what time you eat, what you eat, which is diet, but stress and sleep management. We've identified that these directly impact your insulin resistance, which in turn will directly impact your ability to lose weight or manage your blood sugars, right? And I think most people sort of know that, or like, yeah, but they don't realize how much of a direct impact it has. And really, like you said, before you can even fast, before you can even start to lose weight, it's important to address all of this. But we've got Coach Lisa, who a long time ago actually created this sort of ongoing list of cortisol lowering techniques. I know you have been lately very active creating this group, because every time that somebody, not only does Coach Lisa run our book club, right? But within our community, people will have resources and they share with each other. And then if it's something that a lot of people want to get involved in, like this last book that you were reading about adrenal health, other people have joined in, because these are concerns that I often say in our groups, we're a lot stronger together, right? If you're addressing something as a group, the whole accountability buddy system that we got going on, That seems to be very helpful. But a lot of times people are just overwhelmed. Women feel so overwhelmed because they get so much conflicting information from everywhere. So even if somebody's walking around saying, I know my stress or my sleep is not helping my weight loss journey, sometimes they just don't know what to do about it, right? And so, of course, we're a fasting program, we're a therapeutic fasting program, and that's where we want to eventually get our clients to. But first, it is true. It is counterproductive to do extended fasting if your cortisol levels are all over the place. And that's super understandable for a young mom, somebody who works full time and is going through all of that. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so honestly, when I came to this community, I didn't know that my sleep or my stress levels could be affecting my ability to fast or lose weight. I didn't know anything about cortisol other than what you hear on the news, which is cortisol is bad, which actually that's not true. We do need cortisol, just done the right amounts, like most hormones. I didn't know about the different hormones in female bodies and how that affects you during a certain part of your cycle during the month. So I came here expecting to learn how to fast for X number of hours and how much weight I should expect to lose from that. Really, that's why I came. But what I've gained since then and what I've learned is that it's almost like a side effect of figuring out the other stuff for me. And the mindset. And I had to hear things many, many, many times, told in many, many different ways by many different people before it finally clicked for me. And I had that aha moment of, oh, maybe this is what's holding me back. And I am a person who will go down a rabbit hole very easily. And then I get all in and I kind of like to experiment on my body sometimes with like different supplements and programs and things like that. But who I am in my core really is a helper. Like The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, I think, talks about mavens. And a maven is a person who has information and just wants to share it with everyone. And when I read that book, that was kind of an aha moment for me. Oh, that's what I am, because I have this information and I find it so useful and so beneficial and so fascinating. And I get giddy about it. And I just want to share it with everyone. And I want to reach as many people as it can so that whoever's ready to receive it, if it can change their life, that is so cool. I just love the idea of that. Even if I never know about it, even if I never knew how that might change someone's life, the idea that it could is just, that's what fuels me to do this research, to read these different books, and then to do what I can. I'm just self-appointed as providing resources nobody asked me to, I just did it. Providing resources to the community.
Actually, that's not true. The 2 times that I can think of that you've shared a book with me, I've asked you to share it with a community, but I can attest that you are that person. I can see it. You've never told me this. We've never had this conversation, but I can attest that you are that person. Every time you find something that works for you, and I've got these 2 major examples, right? The gut health stuff and then the adrenal stuff, which are 2 huge things, because you got me right with that gut stuff. I was right in there in your subgroup that you created. And it wasn't me helping people. It was you helping people and me coming in and asking for help as a community member that I am, because I'm very active in the community, of course, not just to answer people's questions, but it's important for my accountability as well. I am a human. I am a person. And so I can attest that you are definitely that person. And that, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to hear from you, because I just thought this young lady is just a force. She's got a lot more to share with us than I even know. So I wanted to hear more about that. Okay, so I don't know how much more of that you want to share with us. Feel free to share more. But I did say that I didn't know, and I was curious to know about your coaching journey. So if you want to share a little bit about that as well, once you're done sharing sort of like your journey up to now.
Yeah. So I heard John's interview on the podcast, actually. And then I had first started listening to the podcast at that time. And I learned that you guys had a coaching program. And so I inquired, and John was available to take on coaching clients at that time. So I signed up with him, and his style, I would say, is a very gentle coaching. The meetings were always great and enjoyable. I always, came away from it feeling really content with what we had discussed and kind of the plans that we had all made together. We would always talk about what we were doing, what was working, what wasn't working, and what the plan going forward was. And John might gently suggest, maybe you should try this, or maybe you might want to think about this. going forward. And I learned a lot from the coaching program, and I enjoyed hearing from all the other people that were in the group sessions. It was motivating and it was inspiring.
Right. And that's another thing for people listening in, maybe don't know too much about our coaching program, is that they do small group coaching. So you would be on a call with 2 or 3 other people usually, right, Steph?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an extra bonus, because when Megan and I started coaching, that's how we coached. At the time, it was for different reasons. It was because there was only 2 of us and we had a ton of people to coach. And so that was the only way that we could. And even morning to night, we were doing coaching in clinic and then online. It was a bit nuts there for a while for Megan and I. So I hope you guys understand why at this point I'm so excited about doing other things as well, right? Because we've coached for a long, long time. And initially, it was just, there was a need for us to coach in groups. But Megan, as you guys know, is a researcher, right? And she's the one that said to me, the research shows that group coaching is the best kind of coaching. That's why things like AA and all these other group programs work so well. One of the reasons is because of groups. So I'm glad that you like group coaching. I love it. I know that people look very often, if they can afford it, for one-on-one coaching. And there's obviously good reason for that as well. But group coaching at some point was the only thing that we had going that we could offer. And I absolutely loved it. And now we have the daily community meetings, which I thought that, well, that's how you and I met, right? It was you would come into my women's health meeting it used to be Tuesdays, now it's on Wednesdays. And I really loved our interaction there. And then, as I said, you at some point mentioned a book about gut health, and that really triggered a thought, because I was like, oh my gosh, I've struggled with my gut health. In fact, I became a naturopath because of my IBS 24 years ago, right? When I went into it. And so I was super curious, and I asked you, Steph, would you please create a group in our community forum? And then we all read the book and we all shared our thoughts and experiences together. And now you've done it again. You came into another women's health meeting and you mentioned adrenal health and cortisol and stress. And that's one of my 5 pillars, but also I think it's such a huge component of what people are struggling with. Everyone, but particularly women. Well, at least that's who I'm most exposed to, right? That's the majority of my clients have been and has been. And that's the groups that I run within our community. And so it was really great for me to have you share that resource. And then you once again created another group. And I'm assuming that's going really well. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So, the subgroups that we've created in the forum around these books that I've found and shared with the community, first of all, I've gotten the ideas to look into these 2 topics from the community too. So it starts with the community. I find that little thread and I pull it and I unravel it and I go down that rabbit hole. And then I come back and I'm like, hey, I figured this thing out and it's so great. And I want to tell you all about it. Please listen to me. But those 2 things, the gut health and the adrenal health, I've known forever that they were 2 of your 5 pillars. But again, I just had to hear it over and over again. And I think I needed to be ready to receive it. That's something I really think I've learned a lot about in this community is, are you ready to receive it when you hear things? Because I've heard the same thing 100 times. And on the 101st time, it finally clicked for me. I've heard other people say that too. And I think that's the really nice thing about having these forums that we have is you can kind of have a topic and all of this information that can be accessed at any time by anyone in the community when they are ready to receive it. So I knew almost nothing about cortisol and adrenal health and HPA axis dysfunction and all of these complicated sounding terms that when you think about it really make a lot of sense until I was ready to receive that information. And then I found this book and I read it and it just was like it was written for me. And you and I both love a 4-week program. Both of these books that I happen to have the forum threads about are, in 4 weeks, you can go from this point to this point. That's nice. It's a nice kind of package deal that it's approachable for people. But the nice thing about the forum stuff for me too is it really helps kind of solidify that. It's almost like I can cement that knowledge in my own head. And it does create accountability too. I feel a little bit like people kind of are counting on me. It creates accountability for myself to kind of stick with these things. I think these 2 things in particular having done the work that I have done on them in the last year has changed my life. And I don't mean that lightly. I am dead serious when I say that they have changed my life. Who I was a year ago, I was a sick person. I was physically sick a lot. And I was not able to cope with stress very well either. And learning about these from the community, from you, the pillars, Coach Lisa, the other coaches, Coach Terry, learning about these topics from the community and then going and learning that information on my own and then bringing it back to the community has been, honestly, it probably is beneficial to me as I hope it has been for the community. I'm well versed in these things now. I can recite the information, which makes me feel like I know it and I understand it, and then I can live it and I can hopefully inspire other people to live it too. And if it can change someone's life, that's amazing.
And again, I can attest to that for sure. I've seen it. I've seen the results. And I remember when you first mentioned the first time in the first book, I remember because we do these live meetings, right? We get to see you. And I remember just thinking that you looked, and I think I mentioned that to you in the group, like you just looked so healthy, so good, right? And so that's how the conversation I remember started. That was ages ago. Anyway, I've saved this bit for now because I really wanted we do this in our meetings, right? When we meet for our community meetings, we start with our NSVs, non-scale victories and other victories, right? Scale victories included. So I kind of wanted to go over that. We haven't talked about that at all. You just have said numerous times how much better you feel. And by the way, an aside here, it was a really nice surprise, but not a shock, to hear you say that you actually didn't know any of this stuff before, that you actually learned it from the community. And then because you're that person who likes to go deeper and deeper. And so it's sort of how this feedback, this very positive feedback works within our community. I have found that for myself. And it's funny. Another aside, Steph, I have a new 4-week program that I'll share with you because Steph is right. We do love, and who doesn't, right? Who doesn't love? You guys know that I do step by step. I love to have a step-by-step approach to things. And this is what I've tried to do with my master classes and my part of the program. So yes, I do love the 4-week programs. I love step-by-step things. And lastly, repetition. Steph said this today, and I couldn't agree more. You guys have heard me say this. I'm a big fan of repetition. I think it takes people, I don't even know, maybe like you said, 100 times to hear something before they're ready to like go, oh, and implement it. I think that's just the way that it is. And so I repeat and I repeat and I repeat, and I'll never get tired of repeating, whether it's my 5 pillars or, the things I say about TRE or fat fasting or whatever else that it is. But now we're ready, Steph. If you could just run down as many of the items that you'd like on the list of your own personal NSVs, non-scale victories or scale victories, if that's what you want to talk about.
Let's see. So for non-scale victories, my number one is fixing my gut microbiome. After we came back to the States, I was sick for a while. I went on some pretty hefty antibiotics, which honestly made me sicker. And I think since then, several years ago, something has not been right. And I was able to make some improvements, but I think that's been a huge non-scale victory for me, which I think can lead into the scale victories, definitely. Managing stress, again, another thing that I've learned from this community that I consider a victory for sure, because I think everyone I know is overly stressed out and could use, no matter how healthy they are, I think we're all a little stressed and we could use some improvement in that area. And I think for me, that's another non-scale victory that's leading into scale victories. A big part of why I did join the community and what's motivating me is I don't have metabolic syndrome, but I do have almost all my family members have it. And I know that genetically I am predisposed for this. And so I am doing whatever I can to be preventative about my health and proactive about my health, because I don't want to end up with poor quality of life. I don't want to end up with, instead of just, 10 or 15 pounds to lose, 50 or 100 pounds to lose. And I don't want to end up sidelined. Other NSVs, I have less pain. I have less inflammation in my body. My mind works more clearly now. I think that all of those things kind of go hand in hand. I used to be that person who would walk into a room and forget what I went in there for. I know that there's a lot of people out there who they say that. And I can say I am not that person anymore. I am not forgetful. I used to get anxiety around how much I forgot things. And I would I would make lists and I would just really stress and obsess about lists and not forgetting stuff and making sure. And I'm just not that person anymore. I feel lighter. I feel freer. I feel joyous. And I think a lot of that is because this community is unlike probably any other community that exists in the world today. Maybe not, but I've never come across any community where such a wide, diverse group of people have a common goal. And the common goal isn't necessarily weight loss or how much weight you have to lose. It's supporting one another to the ultimate goal of health. It's just health. And health can look different for every person. And I feel like I have restored my health. And that's probably my biggest NSV of all. I felt ill and stressed out all the time a year and a half ago. And I did some fasting and I lost some weight and then I couldn't lose any more. And I felt ill still. And since I have come into the community and since I have learned all of the things that I have learned, and I have focused on some things other than just weight loss or other than just longer fasts and that kind of thing, I feel like a different person. For me, that's the biggest victory of all. I don't feel sick anymore. I don't feel like a sick person. Even if I didn't look sick, I felt sick a lot, both physically and anxiety ridden.
Another thing I can attest to, there was a point, after knowing you for a few months, there was a point that I looked at you and I said, you look different. And it is true. And you've looked that way since, you just look radiant. And really, I don't know if I know you guys can't, the people listening can't see you, but I can see you sitting in your closet. I laughed. Steph looks like one of those moms on TikTok, Instagram that go and hide in their closet to get away from their pets or their kids. And so Steph is sitting on the floor of her closet to talk to me in peace. I love it. I thought that was hilarious, but you look radiant. And that is the truth. You glow and I noticed it. And that's how this whole conversation got started. I mean, probably a year ago that you and I first started talking about these things and really sharing with each other, right? As part of the community. And I agree with you. I don't know that there's another community like this one out there. But the thing is that what's great about it is that it's all of the things that you just said, but you get as involved as you want to get involved, right? Because really, people go in our program, right? Either the community or the coaching program, they go for information, but then they stay for everything else. So it's really been great. This is exactly what I thought our conversation would be like, Steph, to be honest. We hadn't rehearsed it. I didn't even know exactly what we were going to talk about today, but I just knew that I wanted you to share your journey and sort of the immense role that you play within our community. So those of you that are in the community or are thinking of joining our community and maybe are not somebody who likes to get that involved, just really wants to, there's lots of people right in the background, always listening in. Then there's people like Steph that you can learn from and will speak for you in groups and ask the questions and share the information. And yeah, my women's health groups on the live meetings on Wednesdays, as you know, they have up to 100 people sometimes, but really it's 5-10 people that speak, 15 maybe. Because the other people are there, they need the support, right? They need somebody to speak for them and ask the questions and lead them. There's a lot of chat in the chat, right? People that aren't able to speak or don't speak within the live meetings, they chat a lot. They write things in the chat.
So much support, so much great resources shared. Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk for you so you don't have to.
That's right. And we need people like you, right? I call you guys the usual suspects, and that's exactly what it is. Thank you so much for all this time. I know you're busy. I wanted to really thank you for not only what you shared with us today, but everything you've been doing within our community and helping me personally. A big, big, big thank you. I know I've thanked you so many times within the forum, but I really wanted to do it here today as well.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great week. Thanks for listening. Happy fasting, everyone.